Winners and losers from Week 13, plus injuries you need to know about right now on Fantasy Football Today Express. Welcome, everybody. Adam and Jamie here recording during the Bills-Niners game. And, McCaffrey with the knee injury. We're going to leave that for Monday's show because we just don't know what the severity is yet. But how about some of the biggest winners and losers? And you know what? We didn't do this on the hour-long show, so let's do it now, Jamie. Let's talk about the top 5 players at each position, and you can highlight who you want to talk about. Top 5 quarterbacks: Jaden Daniels, Russell Wilson, Caleb Williams, all more than 30 fantasy points. Lamar Jackson and Tua Tagovailoa round out the top 5. Jaden Daniels, Russell Wilson, Caleb Williams, and then at about 28, 29 points, we have Lamar Jackson and Tua Tagovailoa. Who stands out to you there?
I mean, obviously, Russell Wilson's the one that we touched on a little bit. Jaden Daniels know what to do. We touched on the other guys on Friday. I think in terms of Russ, it was really mostly about the matchup against the Bengals. I don't think he has a terrible matchup against the Browns. We'll see what happens Monday night, but we know they're a little bit banged up defensively. He did not have a huge game against them in the snow game in Cleveland a couple of weeks ago, but did get you 15 fantasy points, so one more touchdown. There you see a positive stat line, 6 teams on a bye. I think Russell Wilson will be a streaming low-end starting option in Week 14.
And what do you think about Tua? Scoring 28 in the cold, got a lot of it late, got that kind of fluky touchdown to Tyreek Hill.
Yep.
But you thought he's playing pretty well right now.
Yeah, coming back against a Jets team that's, is pretty deflated. In the conversation, for me right now is start of the week, just like the setup for him as I was looking ahead to the schedule. So early quarterback rankings, he's, borderline top 5 guy.
All right, let's look at our top 5 running backs from Fantasy Week 13. And this is, again, not including anyone in the Bills-Niners game. I know James Cook's off to a good start. Bucky Irving, number 1. Bijan, 2. Najee, 3. And then we have a 3-way tie for 4th place between Joe Mixon, Rico Dowdle, and Josh Jacobs. Bucky Irving, Bijan Robinson, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Rico Dowdle, Josh Jacobs.
I like Rico Dowdle coming into the game. Matchup against Giants was fantastic. As you just saw for Najee Harris taking on the Bengals, it was a great performance for him. And you also had some pretty good production for Cordarrelle Patterson and Jaylen Warren. And we know right now with what the Cowboys are doing, it's a lot of Rico Dowdle really dominating touches. So borderline must-start running back, depending on what the injuries look like for Cincinnati in that Monday night game for Week 14. I'm sure everybody's excited to see those two teams match up, mostly from the Dallas side. You want to see Cincinnati. And then for Najee, again, I think it was just taking advantage of this defense for Cincinnati. Heath had a great call. If you still have your trade deadline, if you want to try and sell him, that's not a bad move to make. But I do like the fact that he was involved in the passing game, and that's something that might be hopefully a sign of things to come for this offense as they continue to evolve with Russell Wilson.
And we love the fact that Bucky Irving, 2 games in a row now, has really established himself as the leader.
He's the guy. He's a must-start running back rest of season.
Yeah, he doesn't play on 3rd down, but it doesn't really matter because Baker throws those running backs on 1st and 2nd down. Top 5 wide receivers: Terry McLaurin with 2 touchdowns today, Mike Evans, Parker Washington, Keenan Allen, and then DJ Moore and Adam Thielen tied for 5th. McLaurin, Evans, Parker Washington, Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Adam Thielen.
So 2 waiver wire guys there. People are certainly going to feel a lot more comfortable with Adam Thielen based on his history and, the way Bryce Young is playing. He's got a tough matchup against Philadelphia in Week 14, but should still be added and, in the number 3 wide receiver conversation moving forward. If it was Trevor Lawrence and he somehow is able to play in Week 14 or rest of season, then Parker Washington is going to be a little bit more of a, alluring fantasy option. But just understanding it's Mac Jones, even in a good matchup against Tennessee, more of a deep league option, but certainly somebody worth looking at. So good performance from both of these guys. I think Thielen is a little bit more of a secure fantasy option. That's not saying very much, though.
Brock Bowers is your number 1 tight end. Unbelievable. 30 fantasy points for him. Jonnu Smith and Trey McBride tied for 2nd. And Mark Andrews and Pat Freiermuth tied for 4th. So Bowers, Jonnu Smith, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews, and Pat Freiermuth.
3 must-start options rest of season in the first 3 guys. Bowers has just been a stud. It's going to be fun to rank him next year in terms of overall players, because I think he'll be the number 1 tight end going into the season. And is he a first-round pick? I think the answer is yes. And then Trey McBride, not far behind him in PPR, just based on how he's performed. Jonnu Smith has just become a must-start fantasy tight end. It's just awesome to watch how he's done. And then for the other two guys, I think you look at Freiermuth. I think byproduct of the matchup mostly, but if there is no Calvin Austin, that may be a couple more targets, and not a horrible matchup against Cleveland, as we said, 4 for 59 in that first meeting. For Mark Andrews, look, it's the touchdowns have been there for him, over the last 6 weeks. Is it something that you can consider to be sustainable? They're on a bye in week 14. It's not bad to have Mark Andrews, back in the starting, rotation for fantasy managers.
All right, we'll be right back after this break on Fantasy Football Today Express. And we're back. We'll take a look at Jamie's winners and losers. So you have Brian Robinson Jr., Ladd McConkey, and Russell Wilson as your winners today. Who do you want to highlight?
We talked about Russ. I think for McConkey, you're just seeing the evolution of the number one receiver for the Chargers. And hopefully he's okay. Got a little bit banged up in that game against Atlanta. But even with a matchup against the Chiefs next week, you saw what Jacoby Myers was able to do. You saw what McConkey's been doing. I mean, he's becoming basically a must-start receiver the rest of the way.
Yeah, and the Chiefs have really struggled against wide receivers lately. Your losers were Kyler, Tony Pollard, and Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, Kyler, just a tough stretch of games. He hasn't been good on the road this season. And we'll see how he does in the rematch with Seattle, but it is back home. So we'll be a borderline starter with 6 teams on a bye. I think just in terms of who do you want to talk about? Which one?
Garrett Wilson.
So Garrett Wilson, just with the way Aaron Rodgers is playing right now, we'll see about the matchup against Miami. It's tough to trust him with Rodgers fully, but again, with 6 teams on a bye, you're probably starting, Garrett Wilson. Just frustrating, just across the board frustrating.
All right. Well, we got about a minute left. So I think one of the guys, I would say that in the morning show today, the two guys that we were asked about the most, maybe right up there, were Brian Thomas Jr. and Marvin Harrison Jr. So let's just take a little inventory on the rookie wide receivers in general and where we're at with them. McConkey, Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., Marvin Harrison Jr., that big four right there. How many of them do you view as easy starts?
I think all 4 of them are starters. The easy starts for me right now, depending on Trevor Lawrence's status, I think would be just Neighbors and McConkey. So the other 2 guys I still think are starters. Brian Thomas matchup against Tennessee. I don't think that's a defense you fear at this point. I do like the fact that it's now back-to-back games where he's had quality production with Mac Jones. The blowout against the Lions, he still had a good stat line, garbage time. You could say garbage time somewhat today, even though they were in the game against the Texans. But that I think is something you could sort of hang your hat on, that there's a rapport developing there. And for Harrison, I think the thing that's cool is that, you got the report early this morning that, Jonathan Gannon talking with the NFL Network and saying that, yes, we're going to give him more chances to play. We haven't done that enough. And he has double digits in targets, and so anytime you give a player of his talent level and caliber of play the opportunity to make plays, you're going to want to start that type of receiver. So not an easy matchup in week 14 against Seattle, but with 6 teams on a bye, he's most likely going to be in most starting lineups. And, hopefully it's a sign of things to come.
Jamie, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And everybody, we appreciate you being here on Fantasy Football Today Express. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you on Beyond the Box Score Monday afternoon on FFT.